You have done something cruel. Maybe you told yourself it was justified. Maybe you convinced yourself the other person deserved it. But in that moment, something dark moved through you and you liked it. Don't look away. Every human being carries the capacity for unspeakable evil. This isn't about monsters in history books. This is about you, about the darkness you pretend doesn't exist. Evil is not born, it's made, and the process of making it is terrifyingly ordinary. Today, we're going to dissect the psychology of evil, not to condemn, but to understand. Because the only way to fight the darkness is to know exactly how it works. What you're about to learn will disturb you, but it might also save you from becoming the very thing you fear. The banality trap. In 1961, philosopher Hannah Arendt sat in a Jerusalem courtroom watching Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust, stand trial. She expected a monster. What she saw was something far more terrifying, a boring bureaucrat. Eichmann wasn't a raging psychopath. He was a man who followed orders, filed paperwork, and went home to dinner with his family. Arendt called this the banality of evil. The idea that ordinary people can commit extraordinary atrocities simply by refusing to think. The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil. This is the first uncomfortable truth. Evil doesn't require malice. It only requires obedience. It requires someone to say, "I was just doing my job." How many times have you said that? How many times have you followed a rule you knew was wrong, simply because it was easier than questioning it? Think before you obey. But obedience is just the beginning. What if evil could be manufactured in any of us? The Milgram shock. Yale University, 1961. Psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to understand how ordinary Germans became willing executioners. So he designed an experiment that would haunt psychology forever. Participants were told to administer electric shocks to a stranger whenever they answered a question wrong. The shocks increased in intensity, from mild to potentially lethal. The stranger screamed, begged, went silent. And yet, 65% of participants delivered the maximum shock. They weren't sadists. They were teachers, accountants, salesmen. They looked just like you. The only difference: a man in a lab coat told them to continue. That's it. An authority figure said 4 simple words: "The experiment requires that you continue," and people tortured strangers. Obedience. If this revelation from the 1960s is opening your eyes to how fragile your morality really is, hit like and subscribe to discover more hidden truths about human nature. Because what comes next is even more disturbing. Milgram proved that evil isn't about bad people. It's about bad situations, and situations can be engineered. Stanford basement, August 1971. Stanford University. Philip Zimbardo created a mock prison in the basement of the psychology building. He randomly assigned college students to be either guards or prisoners. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. It was terminated after 6 days. Good people can be induced to behave in evil ways by immersion in total situations. Within 36 hours, the guards began psychologically torturing the prisoners. They forced them to do push-ups, stripped them naked, put bags over their heads, locked them in closets. These weren't criminals or psychopaths. They were Stanford students, bright, educated, privileged. The prisoners broke down. One had to be released after just 36 hours due to acute emotional disturbance. Role becomes reality. Zimbardo discovered something chilling. Give someone power without accountability and they will abuse it. Not might, will. The uniform, the role, the system, these things don't reveal who we are. They transform who we become. But there's something even darker lurking beneath these experiments. Dehumanization. Before you can harm someone, you must first convince yourself they are not fully human. This is the psychological gateway to atrocity. The Nazis called Jews rats and vermin. Rwandan Hutus called Tutsis cockroaches. American slave owners called Africans property, not people. This isn't ancient history. It's happening right now. Every time you scroll past a comment section and see people reduced to labels, those people, that type them, You're watching dehumanization in real time. The moment someone becomes other, they become expendable. Psychologist Albert Bandura called this moral disengagement. We create psychological distance between ourselves and our victims. We use euphemisms, collateral damage instead of dead children, enhanced interrogation instead of torture, ethnic cleansing instead of genocide. People do not ordinarily engage in harmful conduct until they have justified to themselves the morality of their actions. Language becomes a weapon, and the first casualty is always empathy. But dehumanization requires one more ingredient to become truly dangerous: the group mind. You are a different person in a crowd than you are alone. This isn't metaphor, it's neuroscience. When we join groups, activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for individual judgment, actually decreases. Your identity dissolves into the collective. Psychologist Gustave Le Bon observed this over a century ago. By the mere fact that he forms part of an organized group, a man descends several rungs in the ladder of civilization. Alone rational, together dangerous. Think about it. Individually, most people would never throw a brick through a window, but in a riot, in a mob, in a movement that tells them the cause justifies the means. Social psychologist Solomon Asch proved that people will deny what their own eyes tell them just to conform with a group. If others say a short line is long, 37% of people will agree, even when they know it's wrong. Now imagine what happens when the group says violence is justified, when murder becomes loyalty, when cruelty becomes courage. Conformity. This brings us to the darkest question of all: the shadow self. Carl Jung believed that every human being has a shadow, a hidden part of the psyche containing everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. Our capacity for jealousy, rage, cruelty, even murder. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Here's what most people miss. Denying your shadow doesn't make it disappear. It makes it stronger. It forces it underground where it grows without supervision, without restraint. The person who insists "I could never do that" is often the most dangerous. They've never examined their darkness. They've never made peace with their capacity for evil. And when the situation is right, when authority commands, when the group demands, when the victim has been dehumanized, that unexamined shadow takes control. The shadow becomes the master of those who refuse to know it. Jung wasn't telling us to embrace evil. He was warning us, know thyself, or your darkness will know you first. But how does ordinary darkness become extraordinary horror? Incremental evil. Nobody wakes up evil. Evil is a process, not an event. It happens in small steps, each one slightly beyond the last, until you look back and can't recognize how far you've fallen. This is called the slippery slope of moral disengagement. Small lies, big crimes. The Nazi doctors didn't start by conducting lethal experiments. They started by measuring skulls. Then they sterilized the unfit. Then they euthanized the disabled. Then, finally, they ran death camps. Each step prepared them for the next. Each transgression lowered the bar for the transgression that followed. The mind adapts to horror with terrifying efficiency. Psychologists call this desensitization. Soldiers describe it too. The first kill haunts them. The 10th is routine. This is why we must be vigilant about small compromises, the white lies, the minor cruelties, the moments when we look the other way. The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, but right through every human heart. Evil grows in inches, and it grows fastest in those who never see it coming. Moral licensing. Here's a psychological trap you've probably fallen into without knowing. Moral licensing. It's the belief that doing something good gives you permission to do something bad. I donated to charity, so I can cut corners at work. I was nice to my family, so I can be cruel to strangers. I'm fighting for a righteous cause, so my methods don't matter. Research by psychologist Benoit Manin demonstrates this effect repeatedly. People who established their moral credentials in one domain became more likely to behave badly in another. They'd proven they were good, so now they had credit to spend. Good deeds can become a license for future sins. This is how revolutionaries become tyrants, how liberators become oppressors, how people fighting against evil become the very thing they oppose. Heroes become villains. The most dangerous person isn't the one who knows they're capable of evil. It's the one who's convinced of their own righteousness. But if evil is so easy to fall into, is there any hope? The Lucifer effect. Philip Zimbardo named it after the ultimate fallen angel, the Lucifer effect, the process by which good people turn evil, not because they're broken, not because they're different, but because of circumstances that could trap any of us. Transformation. Here's what Zimbardo identified as the recipe for creating evil. Deindividuation, losing your sense of individual identity. Dehumanization of victims. Diffusion of responsibility, everyone is doing it. Blind obedience to authority, uncritical conformity to group norms, passive tolerance of evil through inaction. There are no bad apples, only bad barrels that corrupt good apples. This doesn't excuse evil, it explains it. An explanation is the first step to prevention. The same research that shows how easily we fall also reveals how we can resist. Because for every person who shocked the stranger in Milgram's experiment, 35% refused. For every guard who became a monster at Stanford, there were others who resisted the role. Evil is a choice. What made them different? This brings us to our final revelation, the heroic path. For every study on evil, there is a counter-story of heroism. People who resisted when everyone else complied, who maintained their humanity when the system demanded its surrender. Zimbardo spent his later career studying these people. He found they shared common traits, heightened self-awareness, strong moral identity, and what he called heroic imagination, the ability to see themselves as potential heroes before the moment of crisis arrives. Heroes are ordinary people who take extraordinary action. They questioned authority. They maintained their individual identity within groups. They saw victims as human beings, not categories. Most importantly, they knew their shadow. They had confronted their capacity for evil, and that knowledge gave them power over it. You cannot become a hero by denying you could become a villain. You become a hero by knowing exactly what darkness you're capable of and choosing light anyway. Every day, every decision, every small moment when no one is watching. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. The question was never whether evil exists. The question is what you will do when you face it. The psychology of evil isn't comfortable to confront. It asks us to look in the mirror and see not a hero, but a potential monster. Know your shadow, but that's precisely the point. The people who committed history's worst atrocities weren't fundamentally different from you. They were fathers and mothers, teachers and doctors. They loved their families, laughed with friends, and believed they were good people. The only difference, they never questioned, they never examined, they never imagined they could be anything other than righteous. Awareness of your darkness is the first defense against it. Today you've seen the mechanisms: obedience to authority, conformity to groups, dehumanization of others, incremental moral compromise, and the dangerous trap of moral licensing. Now you know, and knowledge is responsibility. He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. If you made it this far, comment shadow known to prove you've confronted the darkness within. The truth is never comfortable, but it's always worth knowing. Like and subscribe to explore more depths of the human mind. Until next time, stay vigilant.